Okay, so we're going to discuss the big ideas that will be on your test on Monday. The first things you're going to need to know is to study page 5 from your notes, and if you don't have your notebook with you at home, page 5 is posted in Canvas under the module that says Completed Interactive Notebook. So study that page and make sure you know the types of functions, their names, the graphs, and all of that information. The next thing we need to know is function notation. And function notation is where we see like f of x. When I see f of x, that's telling me that my output value. When I see x, or a number inside the parentheses, that's telling me my input value. So if I saw the term f of x equals 5, that means my output is 5. If I saw this term, f of 3 equals 4, that's telling me when I input 3, I get out 4. So let's put that into practice. This question is giving me this function and is telling me f of negative 4. So if you look, that's in the spot of the x. So this means wherever I see an x, I'm going to replace it with negative 4. So basically, wherever I see an x, there's going to be a blank for a moment with some parentheses. So I saw an x here, and I replaced them with parentheses. Inside those parentheses, we're going to input negative 4. From here, we're going to follow our order of operations. In this case, our parentheses only have negative 4 in it, so there's not really anything to do. So now I'm going to move to exponents. What you need to know about exponents is they're only linked to the number right next to it, unless there are a bunch of numbers in parentheses with an exponent on the outside. So we need to do, our exponent is negative 4 squared, which means negative 4 times negative 4. Which would make positive 16. So we kind of crossed out PEMDAS, parentheses. We've done exponents, and now we're at multiplication and division. And what we want to do here is multiply 4 and 16 to make 64. So this isn't really in our list, but we do have one more step. So we've multiplied, but we see the square root of 64. The square root of 64 is 8. So that means when I plug in 4, I get out 8. Let's try the next one. If you're trying this at home, I would definitely pause and try this ahead of me to see if you plug it in correctly. But this means input 3 wherever you see an X. Again, we're going to follow that order of operations. When I check for parentheses, I'm checking for the numbers inside to see if there's anything inside the parentheses I'm supposed to do. In this case, there is not, so we're going to move to exponents. So what I've got going on here is 3 squared, which means 3 times 3, which is 9. So we've checked that, checked our exponents, and now it's time to multiply and divide, and we get 18 plus 9, and finally it's time to add. And we get f of 3 equals 27. For the next one, we're looking at the same idea, but we're using a graph to help us find it. And so what's really happening here is they're telling us either an input or an output value, an x or a y. In this case, they're telling us x is equal to 0. So they want to know what y is. And the way we find that is we go to our graph. So they're telling me x is equal to 0. So I'm going to look at my x-axis and find x equals 0, which is right here. I'm going to float up to my function. When x is 0, y is 5. So that means our answer for f of 0 is 5. The next one, they're telling me that my y value, my f of x, is equal to 1, and they want me to figure out what x is. So to do that, we have to remember f of x is this part. It's even labeled for us. And they're telling us the number is 1. So I'm going to slide over to my function. When y is 1, when f of x is 1, x is 6. The next one is another x value of 3. So they're telling me x is 3. We got to figure out what y is. So I go to 3 on my x-axis, float to the function, and when x is 3, y is also 3. All right, the next rules that we need to know are having to do with multiplying, dividing, and the powers of exponents. When we multiply, we add our exponents. So our new exponent would be 8 over 4, which simplifies to 2. Even if they're negative, and by the way, there is a typo here. These should both be C. If they weren't both C, we shouldn't do it, but I'm just telling you there's a typo. We would add our exponents, and we're going to get negative 4. Our base would stay the same, and our new exponent would be negative 4 over 4, which is the same thing as c to the negative first power. So technically we don't like negatives, but you can add them in the beginning. You would only change them at the end if the question wants you to. So I think on your test they will accept negative exponents. Okay. If your test did not accept negative exponents, you would rewrite it by making it a fraction with a 1 on top and just kind of getting rid of the negative sign. So you would really be left with c to the first power or just c. Either one of those is an acceptable answer. The next one, we are going to subtract the exponents. You're going to keep the base the same and then do 4 minus 3. 4/5 minus 3/5. Which is 2/5. Nope. It is 1/5. There we go. Next one, again, typo, these should both be C. We're going to keep the base the same, subtract those exponents, and we're going to end up with negative 2 over 5. Another correct way to write this would be to put it all over 1 with 2/5 on the bottom. If we see two exponents, one on the inside and one on the outside, that's our cue to multiply. So we would do 3/4 times 4. To multiply fractions, you multiply straight across, which would be 12 over 4, which is 3. So our new simplified exponent is x to the third power. Again, I see an exponent on the inside and the outside, so that's my cue to multiply. You multiply straight across, which would give you 2 over 6. Which is the same as 1/3. If you don't know how to simplify fractions, you're looking for the greatest common factor between 2 and 6, which is 2. All right, on the back, some other things you're going to have to remember are your fraction exponents and radicals and how they're related. So you could kind of relate these two things to each other. You could rewrite 64 to the 2/3 power. With 64 being on the inside. The number on top is always our exponent, and the number on the bottom is always our index. Our indexes go here, and exponents go either here or here. Either one is an acceptable answer. So you could rewrite this with parentheses with an exponent of 2 on the outside, or you could have the 2 on the inside next to the 64. But because it says solve, we would need to finish solving this problem. The cube root of 64 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. The next one, they just want us to rewrite this to have a fraction exponent. Well, I know that my exponent is always written as my numerator, and my denominator is always the index. So it's exponent over index. Okay, the next thing that you're going to need to know for your test is you need to be able to make a list of the perfect squares up to 15 and cubes up to 10. So you would want to kind of count on your paper all the way up to 15 for squares and just square every number. 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, 15 times 15 is 225. You don't necessarily have to have them memorized, but you just need to know how to make them. And then for cubes, you're going to do the number times itself 3 times. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So the reason that that's going to be helpful is to answer problems like this one and to answer problems like these. So to answer problems like these, we're going to take our radicals and break them up into perfect squares. So 128, you would want to find a perfect square that could divide into that. If you look down your list, the biggest one is 64. So 128 could be broken down into 64 and 2. You take the square root of your perfect square and bring down the other. Cubes are very similar, but we just need to make sure we write the 3's on the outside. So the cube root that I could divide 81 by is 27, and 27 times 3 makes 81. I can simplify the cube root of 27 because 3 times 3 times 3 makes 27. So that's how we simplify. The next thing you need to know is adding and subtracting. So we're going to break down that 50 and that 8. So to add and subtract, you need the same number on the inside. So 50, we want to break down into perfect squares like 25 and 2, and bring down that 2. 8, we're going to break down to 4 and 2, and bring down that 4. Now you take the square root of your numbers. Square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of 4 is 2. Everything else comes down. Multiply the numbers in the front. And then finally, we have the same number on the inside, so all we do is add or subtract the numbers on the outside. So we would do 10 minus 8, which makes 2. So we have 2 square roots of 2. The next question is very similar, but it has cubes and an extra step. This does not say 34, it says 3 to the 4th power. So that means 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Well, when you do that math, you should not get 12, you should get 81 plus the cube root of 192, and now we can break those down. So we could break down 81, or we could remember that we did that over here. It was 27 and 3, which became 3 cube root of 3. 192, you would look down your list and just kind of guess and check with your division if you don't know, can be broken down into 64 and 3 as well. The cube root of 64 is 8. I don't know the cube root of 3, so I bring it down. Now these things have the same number on the inside, so we add the numbers in front. 3 plus 8. Oops. Sorry. The cube root of 64, the number that you multiply by itself 3 times to get to 64, is 4. Now we can add those numbers in the front. So 3 plus 4 makes 7 cube roots of 3. And that's how we would write our answer. The next one is dividing and simplifying using perfect squares. 25 and 64 are both perfect squares, so we can actually figure out what those are. The square root of 25 is 5, and when I see a number next to something with nothing in between, I need to assume that there's a multiplication symbol there. And then the square root of 64 is 8. To simplify that more, I multiply on top. And now I need to simplify my fraction of 10/8 by dividing both things by 2, which leaves me with 5/4. Okay, so these are the general ideas, and I did go through them kind of quickly. So if you need more in-depth review, go to the module. I will write it down right here in Canvas. You scroll all the way to the bottom. It's called Completed Interactive Notebook Pages. There are videos in each of those sections that you can watch to get extra help, and there are also the notes we did in class. So these are all of the general ideas you need. If you need any help on any individual practice test questions, just please message